Hey everyone, J7Jace here, bringing you a brief video on the history of duels in the Final Fantasy Tactics series of games, such as when they occur and some tips on how to beat them. Even though most are group battles, there is the rare or infamous occasion where you are forced into only using one character. I'll be going over each time it happens for every FFT game. In the very first Final Fantasy Tactics and in its remaster, Final Fantasy Tactics War of the Lions, the first duel, and I'll put that in quotes here, is in one of the final battles in Chapter 2, at Lionel Castle, where Ramza is facing off against Gafgarian alone, separated from the rest of the party. Although, you could argue that this duel between Ramza and Gafgarian can easily turn into a 2-on-1 or 3-on-1, if your party members have teleport or fly as their movement ability, meaning the only thing Gafgarian will be needing is 911. For first time players though, this battle can be quite difficult as Gafgarian is fast, his Shadow Blade can never miss, and on top of this, it's also ranged and it heals him. And I'd go into the details about how your other characters are outnumbered outside the gate, but I already covered that in my top 10 hardest battles video, which I do recommend watching. But an easier way to offset Gafgarian's damage is to use Auto Potion with only high potions in your inventory. Or you could always cast Corruption, aka Zombie, on yourself so he won't be using Shadow Blade or Night Sword, and turn Ramza into a monk, or a ninja with Brawler, or use a black mage with samurai skills, and Gafgarian should be no problem. The next time we are forced into a 1 vs 1 is in the second to last battle of Chapter 3, and it's arguably the most infamous soft-locking battle in Final Fantasy history. It's versus Wiegraf at Riovane's castle. This battle in particular can be deceiving, as at the deployment screen, we have the option of placing other characters next to Ramza, so initially it doesn't look like a duel, but as the battle starts, it's just Wiegraf versus Ramza at the beginning. This encounter is hard because usually you won't get the first turn in, and Wiegraf has Lightning Stab, aka Hollowed Bolt. It does a lot of damage, not to mention it's also ranged, it can silence you, and finally, it can never miss. Of course, the popular exploit is to equip a Chameleon Robe or to use Auto Potion with only X potions in your inventory, and to slowly increase your speed and attack with Focus and Tailwind to overpower him. And for his second form and phase, this is where your other characters will join up with you, but this part is no longer mano a mano, so I won't be covering it. But I do have a video on how to defeat Wiegraf, so please check that out in the description. Going back to the topic of this video though, the duel versus Wiegraf is the last and only time you'll ever be forced in a 1 vs 1, meaning every other battle after this will be all party engagements. Which leads us into our next game, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. I know not as many people played this game, but it's charming in its own way. Our first duel comes a bit later into the game when you fight the 4th Totema. While the objective, just like Gafgarian, is to defeat all enemies, the only opponent that can harm you here is Babus. Or if you break the laws, then Cid could send you to prison and it's game over. This can be a tough fight if you aren't prepared, but an easy exploit is to equip a Flame Shield or Blaze Robe, as they will allow you to absorb fire, and Ice Shield deserves an honorable mention as it will have fire, which Babus uses often. Explode is what he will primarily be using, as this does fire damage, and if you physically attack him, his counter reaction ability won't do any damage to you, as his weapon is also fire elemental. His second harmful spell that he uses is Demi, and while it can be deadly, having Mirror Mail to reflect this, and of course Damage MP will save you. Damage MP works like Mana Shield or MP Switch in the original Final Fantasy Tactics, but it's arguably even better here, as each time a unit gets a turn in, you will regenerate 5 MP, meaning there is no chance Babus can finish you off. This reaction ability is also a fantastic strategy to use in the final duel, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, which is versus Lednar, which happens when you end up going to the palace for the first time in its second battle. In this fight, it's a matter of survival, as it's impossible to finish Lednar even if you have amazing stats or have Marche at level 50. Lednar hits extremely hard with his unique Omega attack, which is like the ultimate abilities but only better. Having damage MP as your reaction ability will let you tank his damage, as he will rarely get 2 turns in a row, meaning he can survive his output. Last but not least, while there are no mandatory solo encounters in Final Fantasy Tactics A2 for more of the Rift, we can have an optional duel at the end of a fairly long side quest called The Way of the Sword with Vermilda Lotus. She will have to face Guy alone. This battle can be kind of tough, as Guy is a Paravir, better known as Yojimbo, which is arguably one of the strongest jobs in the game due to their fantastic damage output and solid physical attack and pretty good speed. Not to mention this guy cheats and can somehow equip heavy armor. But a way to tackle this fight is to put a ribbon on Vermilda to make her immune to negative status ailments, equip an angel ring for a one-time auto raise, and to give her better knight swords, and this battle should be a wrap. These are all the duels in the Final Fantasy Tactics games. Perhaps there might have been one in Final Fantasy Tactics S, but that game is sadly lost forever in history. I hope you enjoyed this video on the Tactics series. Take care, and all the best to you.